I built this house with my own two hands. Bored the foundation in 1987. Every board, every nail, every damn shingle. Mine. So when I tell you I found another man's boots by my back door, you understand what that meant to me. Not just betrayal, trespassing. My name is Stanley Price. I'm 72 years old, and the woman I married, Olivia Woods, she's 52, 20 years younger than me. Everybody warned me. My daughter warned me. My lawyer warned me. I didn't listen because I was 68 and lonely, and she looked at me like I still mattered. 3 weeks ago, I found the boots. Size 11, steel toe, mud still wet on the soles. Not mine. I don't wear boots like that anymore. My knees won't let me climb a ladder, so why would I need steel toes? I knew whose they were before I asked. Bobby Williamson, 34 years old. I hired him myself back in the spring to fix the roof on the guest cottage. Good worker, showed up on time, charged me fair. I paid that man $11,000 to put a new roof over my daughter's old room. Turns out, I was paying him to put something else over my wife. I didn't say a word about the boots. Not that night. I just stood in my own kitchen and watched Olivia stir a pot of coffee like nothing in the world was wrong. And I thought about the day I proposed to her on this same back porch, down on one knee, my knees screaming at me the whole way down because I wanted her to see I'd do it anyway. She said yes. She cried. I believed every tear. Now I stood there with mud on my kitchen floor that didn't come from my boots, and I understood something for the first time in 4 years. I hadn't married a woman who loved me. I'd married a woman who was patient. The next morning, I drove into town, and I didn't tell Olivia where I was going. I went to see Regina Bridges, best attorney in Buncombe County, and the only person besides my daughter who'd told me the truth about Olivia from the start. I sat down across from her desk, and I said, "Regina, I need you to tell me what happens to a man's house when his wife's been sleeping with the roofer." She didn't even blink. She just said, "Depends on whose name is on the deed, Stanley. Is it still just yours?" I sat there for a long moment before I answered her, because the honest answer scared me more than the boots did. 6 months ago, Olivia asked me to add her name to the deed, said it was for a peace of mind, said if something happened to me, she didn't want to be fighting my daughter over a house she'd lived in for 4 years. I said yes to that too. If you've ever trusted the wrong person with everything you built, stick with me. This story is far from over, and where it's headed, you are not going to believe what she does next. Hit subscribe.
Regina confirmed it in 5 minutes flat. Joint tenancy, right of survivorship, filed 8 months back. If I died with that paperwork standing, Olivia walked away with everything, and my daughter got nothing but a funeral to plan. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my truck outside Regina's office for 20 minutes, just breathing, because I needed my face to stop giving me away before I saw Olivia again. When I finally pulled into the driveway, Olivia was in the kitchen, humming, chopping vegetables like she did every evening of our marriage. Same song, same rhythm with the knife. 4 years of watching that woman cook dinner, and I never once thought to ask myself how she'd learned to lie that smooth. "Good day," she said, not looking up. "Handled some paperwork," I said. The knife paused, half a second. She covered it fast, but I saw it, and I understood something in that moment. She wasn't nervous about being caught. She was nervous about timing, like a woman checking a clock before a plan. I said I was tired and went out to the workshop, the one place on this property still entirely mine. 40 years of tools on that wall, sawdust in the floorboards, a life I built before I ever knew her name. I called my daughter, Jade. "Dad, it's almost midnight." I found Bobby Williamson's boots in my kitchen, and I found Olivia's name on my deed. Long silence. Then, quiet, careful, like she'd been holding this for a while. "Dad, there's something else. Brandon knows. He's known since April." Brandon, Olivia's own brother, the man who sat at my Thanksgiving table every year, ate my food, called me Stanley with a smile, and said nothing. He saw them at the farmer's market, together, Jade said. He told me not to say anything, said it wasn't his place. I should have called you myself. I'm sorry. I didn't blame my daughter. I blamed myself for building a family out of people who'd rather protect each other's secrets than protect me. I hung up and sat on that workshop stool until the windows grew gray with morning light, staring at the printed deed pages Regina had given me. Every board on that wall, every tool, every nail, mine, and none of it would matter if I sat here feeling sorry for myself instead of moving. At 6 a.m., I heard tires on the gravel outside. Too early for the mail. I looked out the workshop window and watched a truck pull up near the guest cottage, not stopping at the house, not knocking on any door. Bobby Williamson's truck. He wasn't there to fix a roof. There was no roof left to fix. I stood in the dark of my own workshop, 40 feet from my own guest cottage, and watched a man let himself onto my property like he owned a piece of it too. That's when I stopped being a husband who'd been wronged. That's when I became a man building a case.
I didn't confront Bobby that morning. I just watched. Wrote the time down on a scrap of paper from my workbench. 6:04 a.m. Took a photo of his truck from the workshop window, plate number and all, because Regina had told me plain the day before. Evidence, Stanley, not accusations. Accusations get you laughed out of a courtroom. Evidence gets you a house. He was in and out of the guest cottage in 11 minutes. I know because I timed it on the same watch I wore to Jade's wedding, the one Olivia gave me for our second anniversary. 11 minutes, 6 in the morning, on a property he had no roofing contract left to justify being on. When he pulled back out onto the gravel, he didn't so much as glance toward the main house. Didn't need to. He already knew nobody watching would say a word. That's the part that sat wrong with me longest. Not the affair itself, but the comfort of it, the routine. Like he'd done this enough mornings that he'd stopped bothering to check. I went inside. Olivia was still in bed, or doing a fair impression asleep. I stood in the doorway a long moment, looking at a woman 20 years younger than me, breathing slow and even, like someone with nothing on her conscience worth losing sleep over. I thought about the vineyard in Hendersonville. 40 guests, a string quartet Jade paid for as a wedding gift, even though she'd told me privately she thought I was making a mistake. I thought about the vows, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health. I don't recall a line in there about Rufus, but maybe I wasn't listening close enough that day. Maybe nobody ever is. I didn't wake her. I went back out to the workshop and called Regina the second her office opened. "I need cameras," I said. "Legal ones, ones that hold up." She was quiet a beat, like she was already picturing the conversation we were about to have. "Stanley, in North Carolina, you can record on your own property, audio and video both, as long as it's not somewhere she'd have a reasonable expectation of privacy. Outside the cottage, the driveway, the porch, that's fine, go right ahead. Inside your own bedroom, we'd need to talk a lot more careful about that. But outside, mount whatever you want." By noon, I had 4 cameras up. One on the workshop eave, angled at the guest cottage door, one tucked under the porch eave, 2 more covering the length of the driveway, front gate to garage. I told Olivia it was for a raccoon problem I'd been having with the trash cans out back. She smiled, said that sounded like a good idea, and didn't look at a single one of those cameras twice. I want you to understand something about that moment. That kind of ease, that kind of not looking, isn't innocence. Innocence gets curious. Innocence asks where you bought them and how much they cost. What I was looking at wasn't innocence. It was practice. A woman who'd learned a long time ago that the safest thing to do with a lie is never examine the room where it might get caught.
3 days went by quiet. I worked in the shop, refinished an old rocking chair that used to belong to my mother, and every hour or so, I'd glance at the little monitor Regina had helped me set up, watching nothing happen, which somehow felt worse than watching something. Then, Thursday evening, Brandon showed up, Olivia's brother, standing at my front door with a 6-pack of beer in his hand like it was any other Thursday of the last 4 years. "Stanley, good to see you," he said, and stuck his hand out, and I shook it, because that's what you do, even when you already know a man has been quietly helping bury a knife in your back since April. I thought about what Jade told me on the phone. He's known since the farmer's market, and I smiled at him the exact same easy smile I imagined Olivia had been giving me every single evening for the last several months. Turns out, I was a faster study than either of them gave me credit for. We sat out on the porch. Olivia brought out a pitcher of sweet tea, 3 glasses, ice clinking, same as any summer evening on this property going back years. It was, on the surface, a completely ordinary night. Except that afternoon, I'd asked Regina one more question, and I already had the answer folded up in my shirt pocket, right over my heart, where it felt like it belonged. Olivia went back inside for more ice. The screen door slapped shut behind her. "Brandon," I said, once we were alone, "how long have you known?" His face did something fast and ugly, like a man watching a door close on his own hand. "Known what, Stanley?" "Don't," I said. "Just that. Quiet. Jade already told me. April, the farmer's market. I know you saw them together." He set his beer bottle down on the porch rail, slow, like the sound of glass on wood was suddenly the loudest thing in the world. He didn't deny it. To his credit, or maybe just because he was tired of carrying it, he didn't even try. "It wasn't my place, Stanley," he said. "You ate my turkey every Thanksgiving for 4 years, sat right there where you're sitting now, called me family. That make it your place, or does family only run one direction in this house?" He didn't have an answer for that. He just looked out at the driveway like there was somewhere else he needed to be. That's when the screen door opened again, and Olivia stepped back out with the ice bucket, and she saw our faces, mine still, his gone pale, and she stopped in the doorway, the way a woman stops when she walks into a room she's walked into 100 times before, except this time something in it doesn't match what she expected. "What's going on out here?" she asked, and for the first time in 4 years of marriage, I heard something underneath her voice that wasn't confidence. It was the first crack. I looked at her for a long moment, and I realized I didn't feel like explaining myself to her anymore, not one more time. "Nothing," I said, "just talking to your brother about honesty." Her face went white as the ice in that bucket. Brandon wouldn't meet her eyes, wouldn't meet mine either, and behind me, mounted quiet on the workshop eave, a small red light blinked steady in the dark, because I'd learned by then that in this house, the only thing left that still told the truth was the footage.
I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the workshop with the monitor glowing blue in the dark, scrolling back through 3 days of footage while the house went quiet behind me. Olivia hadn't said another word to me after Brandon left. She'd gone straight to bed, and I'd heard the lock turn on our bedroom door for the first time in 4 years of marriage. I didn't take it personal. I took it as confirmation. By 2 in the morning, I had what I needed. Tuesday, 6:04 a.m., Bobby's truck pulling up the drive. Wednesday, same time, same truck, 11 minutes inside the cottage. And then, further back, footage I'd almost forgotten the cameras caught because I'd set the driveway ones first. Sunday afternoon, 4 days before any of this started, Olivia walking Bobby to his truck after he'd supposedly finished the roof job weeks earlier, her hand on his arm. Not a handshake, not a goodbye between two people saying goodbye. And I know the difference between two people saying goodbye and two people promising to see each other again. I copied every clip onto a flash drive the way Regina had told me to, time-stamped and backed up twice. Then I sat there in the dark a while longer, because there's a particular kind of quiet that comes after you finally have proof of something you already knew. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like standing at a grave you dug yourself. In the morning, I called Regina before I called anyone else. "I've got it," I said. "All of it. Timestamps, plates, the whole thing." "Good," she said. "Now listen to me, Stanley, because this next part matters more than the footage does. North Carolina's an equitable distribution state, not community property. That deed being joint doesn't automatically mean she walks away with half of everything. But it does mean we've got a fight ahead, especially with your health history in the mix. I want you seeing your cardiologist this week, on the record, showing you're of sound mind and making these decisions clear-headed. Olivia's attorney, whoever she hires, is going to try to paint this as an old man making a rash decision out of anger. We're not giving them that opening." I told her I understood. I did understand. But understanding a thing and feeling it sit easy in your chest are two different animals entirely. That afternoon, Olivia found me in the workshop. She'd changed out of her night clothes, put on lipstick like she was walking into a business meeting instead of a marriage that was cracking open around her. "Stanley," she said, standing in the doorway, arms crossed, "I think we need to talk about what happened with Brandon last night." "I think we do," I said, and I didn't get up from my stool. "It's not what you think," she started, "and I want you to understand that sentence right there, 'it's not what you think,' is the oldest lie in the world, and I'd heard enough of 'em by then to know exactly what it meant. It meant it was precisely what I thought, dressed up in different words so it might slide past me easier. "Olivia," I said, "I have 11 minutes of Bobby Williamson's truck parked at that cottage yesterday morning. I have you walking him to his truck 3 weeks ago with your hand on his arm like a woman who wasn't ready to let go. I don't need you to tell me what it's not. I need you to tell me what it is, or I need you to pack a bag." Her face changed then, fast, the mask slipping sideways for just a second before she caught it and pulled it back into place. "You've been spying on me? In my own home?" "It's my home," I said, quiet. "Been mine since before you knew my name, and it's not spying when it's my property and my cameras and my raccoons I told you about, that you never once asked to see." She didn't have an answer for that either. She stood in that doorway a long moment, and I watched something calculate behind her eyes. I'd seen that same look on men negotiating contracts for 40 years, the look of somebody doing arithmetic on how much they might still be able to salvage. "What do you want, Stanley?" she finally asked. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "let me explain," just, "what do you want?" Like we were haggling over a fence line instead of a marriage. "I want the deed fixed," I said. "I want your name off it, and I want you to understand that come Friday, my lawyer is filing for separation, and every piece of footage I have is going with her." She laughed, short and sharp, no humor in it at all. "You think a 72-year-old man's side over mine? You think anyone's gonna believe you didn't pressure me into that deed? I've got doctor's notes about your heart, Stanley. I've got 4 years of people who say how confused you get sometimes." That's when I understood the shape of what I was actually up against. She wasn't just going to deny it. She was going to try and turn my own age, my own body, into the weapon she used to keep my house. I stood up off that stool slower than I wanted to, my knees complaining the way they always do, and I looked her dead in the eye. "Confused," I said. "That's the word you're going with." "If that's what it takes," she said, and for the first time in 4 years, I heard the real voice underneath all that patience she'd worn like a coat since the day I met her. I walked past her out of the workshop, out into the yard, past the guest cottage where none of this would have happened if I'd never hired a roofer, and I called Jade from the driveway with my hands shaking for a different reason than the anger. "Dad, what's wrong?" she said.
She's going to say I'm not of sound mind, I told my daughter. She's going to use my heart against me to keep this house. Jade was quiet a second, and when she spoke again, her voice had a steel in it I hadn't heard since her mother's funeral. Then we make sure every doctor in Buncombe County is on record saying different, she said. Dad, I'm coming down this weekend, and I'm bringing someone with me. James Cooper next door. You remember him. He's been watching that cottage longer than your cameras have.
James Cooper had lived next door for 11 years. Retired mailman, the kind of man who notices everything on a street because noticing things was his job for 30 years before it ever became his neighborly business. Jade brought him by Saturday morning, and he sat at my kitchen table. Olivia wasn't home, out clearing her head, she'd said, though I suspected clearing her head meant clearing out a plan B, and he told me something I hadn't even asked for. Stanley, I've got a camera on my own property, faces your driveway on account of the deer getting into my garden, James said. Been running 8 months. I never thought much of it till your daughter called, but I went back and looked. That Williamson fella's truck's on there 11, 12 times since March, regular as Sunday church. 8 months, since before the deed was even signed. I sat there at my own kitchen table and felt something in my chest settle for the first time in 3 weeks. Not relief exactly, but the feeling of a man who finally has ground solid enough to stand on. Regina filed Friday afternoon like she promised. Separation and a motion to have the deed reviewed for what she called undue influence. Olivia getting her name added while I was still recovering from a cardiac scare. 6 months into convincing me it was for my own peace of mind. Regina also filed something else I hadn't expected, a request from my cardiologist's full records, submitted proactively before Olivia's side could even ask. Get ahead of the story, Regina told me. Don't let them write it first. Dr. Alderman's letter came back 3 days later, clear as anything. Full cognitive function, sound decision-making capacity, heart condition stable and unrelated to any impairment. I read that letter twice standing in my own driveway, and for the first time since I found those boots by the back door, I let myself cry, not from sadness, from the particular relief of a man who'd started to believe just a little that maybe she was right about him. Olivia's attorney tried what Regina expected, called me confused, called me vulnerable, called 4 years of marriage a complex situation requiring the court's compassion for a man in declining health. But we had Dr. Alderman's letter. We had James Cooper's 8 months of footage, independent of mine, unprompted, showing a pattern that started well before any deed was signed. We had my own cameras, and we had Brandon, who, whether out of guilt or simple exhaustion from carrying somebody else's secret, agreed to give a statement to Regina about what he'd seen at that farmer's market in April and when it started. The hearing was in October. I wore the same suit I'd worn to Christopher Cole's funeral 11 years back, my old business partner, because it was the only suit I owned that still fit right and felt like a man who meant business. Olivia sat across the room in a dress I didn't recognize, next to a lawyer who kept touching her shoulder like she needed steadying. Bobby Williamson wasn't there, didn't have the nerve, I suppose, or didn't have the stake in it anymore. Men like that rarely do once the free roof's already been walked away from. The judge reviewed the deed, the footage, the medical letter, Brandon's statement. Took less than 20 minutes to rule that the joint tenancy had been obtained under circumstances that warranted setting it aside. Undue influence, plain and simple. A vulnerable period exploited by someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The house entirely reverted to my name alone. Olivia would receive a modest settlement tied to her time in the marriage, nothing close to what she'd been counting on when she asked me to sign that paper for peace of mind. She didn't look at me when the ruling came down, just gathered her things and walked out of that courtroom fast, like a woman who'd already started rehearsing the next version of this story for whoever came next. I drove home alone. The first time in 4 years I'd pulled into that driveway without wondering whose truck might already be parked near the cottage.
The house sat there in the October light exactly the way I'd left it 40 years of memory ago. Foundation I poured myself, boards I cut myself, a life I built with my own hands long before I ever let somebody else's name get written into it.
Jade met me on the porch with 2 glasses of sweet tea, and we sat there a long while without talking, which was its own kind of conversation after everything. "You did good, Dad," she finally said. "I know it doesn't feel like winning yet, but you did good." "It feels like I lost 4 years," I said. "You didn't lose them," Jade said. "You just found out what they were worth. That's different." I thought about that a long time after she went back to her own place that evening. About Christopher Cole, my old partner, who used to tell me a man's word is the one thing nobody can put their name on but him. About the vineyard in Hendersonville and the vows I meant with my whole chest, even if the woman across from me hadn't meant hers the same way. About Bobby Williamson's boots, mud still wet, the first honest thing in this whole story, because at least mud doesn't lie about where it's been. I had the deeded cottage roof reshingled that November, a different contractor this time, a woman named Sandra, who did the job in 3 days flat and never once asked to come inside for coffee. Small thing. Felt like more than that. The guest cottage is Jade's again, the way it was supposed to be all along, before I ever thought I needed somebody 20 years younger to remind me I still had some living left in me. Turns out I had plenty of living left. I just needed to remember it was mine to spend, not something to hand over to whoever asked nice enough. I still sit on that back porch most evenings, same spot where I got down on one knee 4 years ago, knees screaming the whole way. These days, I sit there alone, and it doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like a man finally sitting in a house that's entirely, unmistakably, legally his own. Some things you build with your hands. Some things you have to rebuild with everything else you've got left. Either way, I'm still standing here, and this house, every board, every nail, it's still mine.